Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome to Partnerships for Profit. Today we are joined by Corey Quinn, who is an agency growth advisor, a vertical specialization expert, and the creator of the Deep Specialization Method. Corey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am excited and pumped to be here.
Can we start off? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about the Deep Specialization Method?
Sure. So I'll give you the 10,000 foot overview. I've been in business for many years. I've been in the agency space about 20 years. I graduated from business school here in Los Angeles at USC, and I decided to not do what all the cool kids were doing after they graduated with their MBA, which is to go into commercial real estate. I went into the agency space. So I got a job as a business development representative. I was selling PPC and SEO services to large retail brands, companies like Lululemon and Remax and Hyundai, the Men's Warehouse. I loved sort of the art and science, the hustle around sales and selling. I made my way into sales management, and then I eventually was the chief marketing officer, switched over to marketing. So chief marketing officer for a digital agency called Scorpion. And during my time there, we grew the revenue from 20 million to 200 million in about 6 short years. We grew the size of the sales team from 6 people to 100. We grew the number of employees at the company from 100 to 1,000, and we grew the clients from 1,000 to 14,000 clients in that time. I've since left the agency at the end of 2021. I decided instead of going back in-house, I was going to consult and start working with people, entrepreneurs, business owners. I decided to write a book. It's called a book called Anyone, Not Everyone. And it's my 5 steps to help agency founders and really any service business to escape founder-led sales. And so that's really the focus of the work I do now.
That's amazing. At what point, I'm curious now, at what point did you realize that you needed to write a book?
Yeah, great question. So it was kind of the playbook that I learned when you want to become a consultant, right? There's the root word of authority is what? Author, right? And so becoming an author, and I took it fairly seriously. I followed a course, and I did a sort of the long, expensive route of writing. I didn't just outsource it to ChatGPT or whatnot. In fact, ChatGPT was not really around in the way it is today. But what I learned is that as a result of writing a book and going through that process about a year long, it helped me to think more clearly about the ideas that I put into the book, the experiences I had at Scorpion, and it helped me to articulate them more clearly. And so I got to tell you, when I'm on a sales call with someone and they say, "Hey, Corey, excited to talk to you," and they show my book in the frame of the Zoom, they say, "I read your book and it was amazing," I know that I'm going to close that deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's incredible. I love that quote that the root word of authority is author. That's great.
That's right.
And I'm curious, can you define for our listeners a little bit more about when, you're working with a client, what are some of the pain points and problems that they're having that you're helping them solve?
Usually they're coming to me because they are a entrepreneur, a founder of a service-based business. I focus on agencies mostly because that's my background, but certainly attorneys, CPAs, other service businesses, you typically have somewhat of a technical founder, whether that's SEO or a lawyer or accountant, whatnot, and they build a business. They go out and they build a business, and the way that they do that typically is they hang out a shingle and they say, either on a part-time moonlighting basis or a full-time, they say, "Hey, does anyone need a lawyer, or does anyone need a website, or does anyone need SEO?" And of course, as a result of doing that, what happens is that they begin to get people in their network saying, "Hey, yes, Corey, I'd love to work with you. Will you help me with that, with my website, for example?" And of course, because this is your very first client or first couple clients, you're going to over deliver for them. This happens all the time, right? You go above and beyond, you deliver this amazing website for them. And then what happens next is that very naturally they refer their colleagues, right? So all of a sudden you're in business. This is great. It's a great way to get started. The challenge, of course, is that what we see time and time again is that eventually the founder lifts their head up and they say, I'm in a business with too much context switching, which means that every day them and their team are doing something slightly different. For example, today they're doing a website for a dentist. Maybe the next day, maybe they sold a TikTok campaign for a manufacturing company. Maybe the next day they're doing a social media campaign for a clothing line. Right? They're just doing all this random stuff, and they build a business that is operationally inefficient. You hear about people like Dan Martell and all these people talk about writing these SOPs, standard operating procedures.
Right.
But what happens is many of us have gone through the process of going and developing these SOPs. And what ends up happening, of course, they end up in the drawer collecting dust because they don't work, because no one uses them, because everything we do is every client is very different. So the consequence of that, of course, if you go deeper, is that you build a business that's full of bottlenecks. Like that nothing happens automatically. It's all based on a bunch of sort of bottlenecks within the business. And you can imagine, who is the number one bottleneck in the business?
It's got to be the founder, right?
The founder, right? Exactly. Because that founder is the person who sold the deal. It was different than any other deal. So they're the one who truly understands what was sold, what has to be delivered,
right?
What the nuances are. And when you build a business, service-based business, where you have a team that's led by a founder that has a bunch of bottlenecks, you result in a lot of what they call scope creep. You do a lot of things that are one-offs and a lot of favors, and you kind of, it's not a very clear scope of work. So things creep. As a result of that, you get mediocre. Your clients get mediocre work, and when they get mediocre work, they see you eventually as a commodity, someone who is really not that excellent. The product you're getting is not that great. So when you become a commodity, you get traded. Clients leave. Clients churn. Right? They don't want to stick around because they feel like a number. They don't feel special.
Right.
And when the clients churn, that same founder who started this business way long ago doing just referrals, when they lose revenue, they have to what? They have to go out and replace that revenue. They have to go chase revenue. And that causes them to say yes to everyone. Right? Like they have a mortgage to pay, they got employees to pay. So they have to go out and just get more revenue. And maybe saying yes to this new client isn't perfect, isn't ideal, but it's going to help us to keep the lights on.
Right.
That becomes what I call the generalist doom loop. Upon itself, it's sort of a downward spiral. It's full of bottlenecks and burnout. And it is the thing that traps so many agencies. When they're in that sort of doom loop, if you will, that's usually when they hire me because they're ready to escape that.
Right. And I mean, can you talk a little bit about what is the kind of, importance of that deep specialization in that and that niching down,
Yeah. Well, that's really the way out of this doom loop. If you want to step out of the doom loop and you want to do something else and actually progress the business to the next level, it starts with choosing a vertical market. And what I mean by that is instead of servicing SMBs or any business, maybe you decide to focus on, let's call it dentists. Right. And as a result of focusing on dentists, and there's a process and a methodology to choose the right vertical market. We could talk about that if you want, but effectively you choose a vertical market. And as a result of that focus, building a book of business around the same type of business that has the same problems that you solve over and over again, you start to build some expertise, right? You're like the old Bruce Lee quote, which is, I fear not the man that's practiced 1,000 kicks once. I fear the man that's practiced one kick 1,000 times. It's through repetition you get access to a lot of the nuances that otherwise generalists won't see. Right. When you have a systematized process, you're able to have much more internal leverage. At my time at Scorpion, because we originally sold to attorneys only, we were able to have, it wasn't really a conveyor belt, but you could think of it like a conveyor belt where a client signed a contract and then it went to the next person in line, went to the next person in line, next person in line. This was a programmatic experience that was a great experience for the client, allowed us to be much more, deliver a much better product with a lot more predictability. Right. And most important, well, I would say one of the most important things, it didn't rely on us having a superstar client, a superstar employee who would know the thing to do. We didn't have that internal sort of dependence. We were able to bring in junior people, train them on the system. right? And that ability to produce great results for dentists over and over and over a period of time, that builds authority, right? And that authority allows you to build and charge premium prices. Of course, that's what we all want. And when you have premium prices, you have better margin. People stay with you for longer, better lifetime values. And the trick here, this is what makes it a flywheel, is that when you have a premium pricing, you take that extra margin and then you reinvest it back into that industry. Maybe you go to more conferences. Maybe you hire more people. You hire more sophisticated sales team or sales coaches, so on and so forth. It becomes this moat that you can build around your business that allows you to really scale up in a new way.
And when businesses are scaling in that manner, what are some things that they can do to ensure that they are doing so in a sustainable way? I mean, it seems like it would be easy, if a business is scaling swiftly, for all of their processes and procedures and everything to become overwhelmed by that growth. And how can they ensure they're doing it in a sustainable way?
That's a good question. Usually what I find in doing this for a while is that there are two kind of types of problems or bottlenecks within a business. Usually it starts with sales. Now, you don't have enough sales, right? And once you resolve that bottleneck, and meaning you're able to drive more sales, maybe you invest in some more marketing, you hire another sales team, whatnot, all of a sudden the pressure goes on the delivery or the operations side of the business, right? And so all of a sudden now you have this bottleneck where you sold all these contracts, you're way behind on deliverables. You go in, you invest in hiring more people, getting a better system, having better SOPs. And all of a sudden over time, you're going to start building some extra capacity in operations. And you say, our bottleneck is no longer operations. Guess what? It's in sales again, right? But it's not the same problem. It's a new sales problem. So you rinse and repeat. It goes back between sales, operations, so on and so forth. So this is the normal part of a business growth. You just have to find the bottlenecks in your business, preventing you from hitting the revenue targets that you want, and you approach it in that from that perspective.
Can you tell us a little bit about, that journey of, being with Scorpion and growing from 20 million to 200 million in 6 years? Can you tell us a little bit about what that journey was like and what changes you saw and how you approached handling that sort of an explosive growth like that?
Yeah, it was a lot of work. I gotta be honest. It was one of these cultures. I'm not sure if the businesses still operate this way, but it was very much like a family feel to it, where we were all in it to win it. We had a work hard and play hard culture, really big goals, but we celebrated really good. People on the sales team got cars. We gave away trips. We gave away cash bonuses. We were very much a competitive and competitive environment. We rewarded everyone really well based on performance. So there was that kind of vibe to it, which was something I respond to. I probably worked too much. I neglected my family a little bit too much, which I regret. But I also learned a lot, right? One of the things that allowed us to scale in that way there was chaos. Trust me, there was chaos, but it was less chaos than I guess you could imagine if we had approached multiple or any vertical at any time, because every business we close, every client would be very different. We took the opposite approach. We took a deep specialization approach, which was, we're going to target attorneys and we're going to become the world's best agency, in this case, digital agency for attorneys. And we had built up that engine, which was, again, very repeatable, very process driven. We built a bunch of software internally, allowed us to really have a great product. Then we decided, hey, this is great. And we want to accelerate our growth by going into a second vertical market. And so what we did is, instead of having our legal team also work with home services, which was our second vertical, we actually developed a new business unit, a separate set of resources that was incremental to the attorney-related clients or teams, that allowed them to work independently and quickly. And it also, probably the most important part of that, is that it allowed that team to become specialists in home services. Companies like plumbing, HVAC, electricians, roofers, so on and so forth. And so we could speak their language, which is a very different language than the attorneys, which actually turns out to be really important for them, because a lot of them have been burned before. They wanted someone who they could trust. So I think the vertical specialization, the multi-vertical specialization was probably one of the most critical things we could do to allow us to scale that big. Right. That's number one. Number two is, instead of just working with individual businesses that had a single location, we eventually diversified into a third vertical market, which what we called was franchising. So these are multi-location businesses where you get one sale, you get 200, 300 locations.
Right.
So the sales are much bigger, a lot more scope, but a lot more revenue too.
And I'm curious, with that franchising and that sort of growth in that area, what role does like marketing, advertising, branding, what role does all of that play in driving that growth?
Yeah. So I'll tell you one of my favorite stories about how we kind of put ourselves on the map. If you've ever sold, have you ever sold into franchise brands?
No, I have not.
Okay. Yeah. So the thing that I learned, I had neither, but the thing I learned over time is that these franchise businesses, it's an industry that's it's a very small, tight-knit community. People know, everyone knows everyone else. Everyone's watching what everyone else is doing. And even though it's a fairly large, and so we knew that if we went to the biggest franchise conference and we found a way to kind of wow everybody, that it would give us an opportunity to really put our name on the map. So what did we do? We went to the annual, it's called the International Franchise Association Conference. It's in Vegas. It's this big, tens of thousands of people come, all the big brands, all the clients we wanted to get. And this time we were nobody. We created a huge double-decker 30 by 30 booth. So 30 by 30 double-decker, huge booth. And at the booth, we had a Tesla S. And we gave people at the conference an opportunity to win the Tesla at the conference. The way it worked was you had to go to our booth, you had to get scanned at our booth, and then on day 3 of the 3-day conference, you had to be at our booth, and we were going to take all the people who were scanned, and we're going to pull a name out of a hat. And that person had to be there, and if their name was called and they were there, they would get the keys to that Tesla, right? So we literally did a live car giveaway on the floor. We had probably 3,000 or 4,000 people at our booth on day 3.
Wow.
All hoping that they would win. And even if you don't win, one person won, but even if you don't win, it's a fun moment, right? And so that was something that we did that allowed us to kind of introduce ourselves in a unique way to that small industry.
Right. It's ensuring that's such a great idea, ensuring that they have to be there on that day 3 for that chance, and it's fun no matter what, right?
Exactly.
I'm curious, like when you are looking at, when you're implementing these systems and you're bringing them into businesses, is it sort of a one size fits all approach that you're using, or is your sort of strategy each time custom tailored to that industry and the niche they're trying to target?
Yeah, great question. There's some of that. So the way the model works that I teach and I train on is, number one, you think of it like a pyramid. The bottom foundation is specialization. Stop selling to everyone, sell to a specific vertical market. There's a process to get there. Once you have that, then you build on referrals. So you find your businesses that can refer you in that industry. That's sort of the next layer up on the pyramid. The next layer above that is inbounds. This is capturing people in that industry who are looking for an agency in this context. Then the next level up is outbound. Actually picking up the phone, sending gifts, doing all this crazy stuff to get appointments. And then the top of the pyramid is growth through mergers and acquisitions, effectively buying companies to grow more rapidly. And what I found, I'll tell you a story about Bill Hauser. He's the founder of SMB Team. He and his partner, Andy, they had built up their agency. They target attorneys, and they do digital marketing for attorneys. What they were able to do is, during COVID, they started doing these webinars. And at these webinars, they would have hundreds of attorneys come to these webinars. And by the time they hired me, they had not just hundreds of people going to this webinar. It was like thousands of people every quarter would go to these events that they would host. And they came to me and they said, "Corey, we love what you did at Scorpion. We love that you would send gifts as a part of your outbound outreach, right? So there's a whole strategy I teach about that. And they said, we want to do that. We want to do the gifting. And it turned out once we got started that it made more sense for them to not worry about gifting at all, but to look at the event strategy that they had built and be able to take that to the next level. The idea is don't start working out a brand new muscle when you have an established strategy that is working. And for them, they ultimately were able to close $3 million every time that they had those quarterly events. And it's very, very successful. Them still is.
Wow.
The reason why I say that is because another agency, just like them, selling to that same audience, would probably not do great for webinars and workshops just because it's not in their DNA. It's not their personality. These guys are like, I don't know if you've ever seen like the Tony Robbins kind of hype it up kind of people. That's what these people are like, right?
Little microphone,
Right, a little microphone standing in a wall of in front of a wall of screens and all that. They would do all of that, and that suited them. Sometimes you have agency founders who are much more, let's call it, for lack of a better term, much more introverted. Like they don't want to get on stage and hype a bunch of people up. That's just that would be their nightmare.
Right.
And so there are other ways for them to get out there. So long story short is that you have to choose a channel that you can commit to for the long run. So we're doing a podcast right now. You probably know that it takes a while to really get a podcast going, to get it off the ground, to get it, to build the downloads up and so on and so forth. That takes repetition over a long period of time.
Right.
And so the key is you have to find a channel, could be a YouTube channel that you build, could be a newsletter, could be a podcast, could be other things that you could see yourself committing to for the long run. It's something you should be excited by. It also has to be something that your target audience care about, So those are some of the things that go into it.
I mean, you sort of teased me there a little bit, and now I'm curious. Can you dive a little bit deeper into your gifting strategy for us? This idea of gifting as a part of growth strategy.
So when I got to Scorpion in 2015, there was a 6-person sales team. They worked in this, like, it's not a boiler room, but it's like a separate room. There was like phone calls going. There's a buzz in the room. It was awesome. And the way it worked is that they had every Scorpion client had a Scorpion website. And at the bottom of the Scorpion website was a Scorpion logo and a link to our sales team, right? So how would happen is that they would get these really great warm inbounds from other attorneys who saw their competitor working with us, so they wanted to work with us. And this 6-person sales team, they would pick up the phone. An hour later, they'd hang up the phone. They'd stand up, go walk over to this big metallic gong and strike the gong because they did a one-call close. Like, these guys were crushing it. The problem was that they were that the founder who hired me, I was an expensive hire for him. Like he had had never had a CMO. This is a new thing for them. They didn't hire me just to like kind of nurture what was going on. My job was to help us to accelerate the growth of the business. And so we had to figure out, how do we maximize inbounds? How do we maximize referrals? And then we had to figure out, how do we bring in outbound? Like, how do we actually get some additional new sales that doesn't rely on us waiting for the phone to ring?
Right.
And so we did what most people will typically do when it comes to outbound. We bought a huge list of attorneys from Dun & Bradstreet, which was an old list broker back in the day. They're still around. And we get this spreadsheet. We'd say, here, salesperson, here's 500 attorneys. You call these. And this other salesperson, you call these 500 attorneys. And they would very reluctantly, I don't know if you ever tried to get people to cold call who don't want to, but it's like and a lot of sales resistance, what they call it. And so it sucked for a long time. We hired a sales coach. We tried to figure this out. And it wasn't until we, just as an experiment, we sent a bunch of gourmet cookies to the law firm ahead of a cold call. What happened is you send these gourmet cookies in a FedEx box, you overnight it to the law firm, and the FedEx box bypasses the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper is the person who answers the phone. They're the office manager. They're trying to prevent the attorney from getting any cold calls or solicitors. And so the cookies would arrive. The cookies would end up in the break room. And by the way, these are fantastic cookies. These are like, if you're not like holding the wall while you're eating them, you're going to fall down. Like that's how good they are. Right. So they end up in the break room and the staff is standing around drinking coffee, having these amazing cookies, saying like, well, who brought the amazing cookies? And someone else will say, oh, I don't know, some company called Scorpion. And someone else would say, well, who's Scorpion? And someone else would say, I don't know, some marketing company, I guess. Before we knew it, the name Scorpion was like bouncing off all the walls. And by the time we called, instead of the typical resistance we'd get from the gatekeeper, it was more like, oh my God, you are the ones who sent those amazing cookies. Oh my God, thank you so much. We ate too much of those. Hold on, let me put you through. So it was a fluke and we figured it out. And we ended up taking that kind of, that inspiration and we built it into our sales process programmatically, where by the time I left, we had 60 full-time sellers who all had 250 gifts going out to 250 prospects per quarter. And that was their job, just following up on the gifts. Right. It turned into our number one revenue driver for new business was gift-based outbound.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you think back on all of the, businesses that you have helped scale and founders that you've helped get out of the, line of fire of their own operations and processes and procedures and everything, is there a story, I know Scorpion obviously, but is there a story of a business that you have helped that you really saw a positive outcome or transformation in as a result of your help and guidance? And is there one that sticks out that you could share?
Okay. So one is a company called Matchnode, Chris Madden. He came to me. They were a, relatively successful agency. They've been in business for a while. They're based out of Chicago. And they did business with companies like the Chicago Bulls and whatnot. And they were frustrated because despite the fact that they had a really talented team and that they did good work, business was kind of hit and miss. Pipelines were dry. They didn't know it was hard. It was hard for them to generate new business. And they realized that, hey, we really want to become a specialist. We want to become known. We want to become the go-to because we're tired of, this inconsistency. So I took Chris through my process for helping to make a very qualified decision on which vertical market to target. And he chose an industry, a really good industry, actually. It's called digital health, which is kind of a new niche industry around different health apps and whatnot. And so we went through that whole process. We helped them to develop something that's called a point of view and really get clear on their positioning messaging. Then we did a whole go-to-market strategy together. And now their business is, they're busier now than they ever have been. They've grown dramatically. And part of it is frankly because they chose an industry that's really growing as well. But it was through the specialization that they were able to really get clear and people could find them really well. And they're just absolutely crushing it.
Wow. And, I'm wondering, everything that you do, everything that you've done throughout your career, it's all about helping businesses grow, helping, people scale things. Just, it's all coming from a place of helping. And I'm curious, is that sort of drive to help, is that something that was just innate to your character, or is that something that you've cultivated along the way?
So let's see. I've always been a helper. I think I've always wanted to be in a service related business. And the thing that I think excites me is I don't want to just kind of help people do typical things. I want to help people do awesome things. And I've always been sort of drawn towards things that are tactics or strategies that are high leverage. So for instance, specializing is a high leverage thing to do. Right. Because it makes things a lot easier. You can streamline the business and scale. Growth through M&A is also another big lever. So I try and find things that are particularly useful for businesses, and that excites me. And then helping entrepreneurs, which I am entrepreneur at heart, that also gives me a lot of energy.
Well, that's amazing. Corey, this has been an awesome conversation.
Thank you.
If anybody out there listening could use your help and guidance or would like to check out the book, where can people find you? Where can people find the book?
Sure. So I would say the very first place to go is first, like the book is on Amazon. You can find it on my website, which is at CoreyQuinn.com. You can also find it at anyoneNotEveryone.com. But I would direct people to my, I have an assessment, a free assessment. It takes about 3 minutes, and it will give you your agency growth score. This is true for attorneys, other businesses, but it will assess where you're at, where your bottlenecks are, and give you advice on how to unlock those bottlenecks. So it's not just a survey with a score. It's also a prescription on how to get you to the next level. And that's at agencygrowthscore.com. That's agencygrowthscore.com. That's
amazing. Well, Corey, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was fantastic.
Yeah,
that was a really interesting and engaging conversation. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. Happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Partnerships for Profit, presented by LeDuc Entertainment. Corey, thank you so much again.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.